Sometimes it isn't the goodbye that hurts. It's the fact you didn't know it was the goodbye. You were watching the game, beer in hand, maybe half arguing with someone on the couch about a substitution. And somewhere in the 90th minute, without any music playing, without any commentator warning you, without a single graphic on the screen telling you what you were watching, a player you had loved your entire adult life walked off a pitch for the last time. You just didn't know it yet. This is a video about those moments. The exact seconds where football stopped being a game and became a memory. Where a legend who felt permanent, who felt like part of the furniture of your life, quietly stepped out of the frame and never came back. And this channel has gone back through the tape of every single one of them, frame by frame, gesture by gesture, because these moments aren't loud. They're the opposite. They're the ones that hide inside a normal-looking match until you see them again years later and finally understand what you were staring at. You know the feeling. You felt it. Maybe with Zidane in Berlin. Maybe with Totti in the tunnel at the Olimpico. Maybe with Iniesta walking through the rain at the Camp Nou with his son on his shoulders. Maybe more recently. Maybe last week you rewatched a clip on your phone and it hit you sideways out of nowhere because you realized you never even said goodbye properly. It makes sense that it hits like that, because football sold us the idea that these players would always be there. Every season, every window, another year, another chance, and then one afternoon, without warning, the chance was already gone. The reason we're talking about this right now, in this exact month, is because we're inside the fastest turnover of legends the modern game has ever seen. The generation you grew up watching, the one that made you fall in love with the sport in the first place, is walking off the pitch in real time. Some of them we saw leave the right way, with tears and flowers and a lap of honor. Some of them we're still not ready to talk about, because the wound is too fresh. And some of them, the ones that hurt the most, we didn't even notice were leaving until it was already over. No farewell tour. No standing ovation. Just a substitution that looked like any other substitution, and then silence. We put this list together the hard way. We watched every match cited in this video from beginning to end. We paused on the faces. We looked at the teammates. We looked at the opposing bench. Because these are the moments that don't live in the highlight reels. The highlight reel wants the goal, the trophy, the celebration. The moment we're talking about lives one camera cut later, when nobody was still filming with intention. It's the shot that only makes sense in hindsight. So here's what we're doing. We're going to walk through the exact seconds, one by one, where the world quietly realized it was watching a legend for the last time. We're going to look at the body language, the look on the bench, the teammate who couldn't hold it in, the camera cut nobody was ready for. And by the end you're going to understand why some of these goodbyes feel like closure, and some of them still feel like an unfinished sentence you never got to speak out loud. Stick with us, because the one that opens this list isn't the one you're expecting. It's older than you think. It happened inside a match that the whole world was watching for a completely different reason. And the moment itself lasted less than 4 seconds. Blink and you miss it. Except you never do. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Berlin, July 9th, 2006. You already know the match. You don't need me to tell you the match. It's the one everybody was watching. The one your dad was watching. The one your uncle who never watches football was watching. World Cup final. France against Italy. Olympia Stadium. 70,000 pairs of eyes inside the stadium and hundreds of millions more on the other side of the screen. But here's the thing about that night. What everyone remembers is the wrong 4 seconds. Everyone remembers the headbutt. Zidane. Materazzi. Turn. Contact. Chest. Red card. You could recite it in your sleep because it's been replayed on television more times than any other single incident in the history of the sport. That's not the moment we're here for. The moment we're here for comes a few minutes later. When Zinedine Zidane, 34 years old, 3-time FIFA World Player of the Year, a man who had already announced to the world months in advance that this exact game was going to be the last game he ever played as a professional footballer, walked down the tunnel steps of the Olympia Stadium. Alone, silent, head down, and to his right at eye level, on a small illuminated pedestal, was the World Cup trophy. He didn't look at it. He couldn't look at it. He walked straight past. And in that half second, without music, without commentary, without anyone in the stadium even knowing what they were watching, the greatest player of his generation ended his career forever. Not with a goal, not with a save, not with a trophy lifted over his head. He ended it by walking past the one thing his entire career had been building toward and pretending it wasn't there. That's the moment. Not the headbutt, the walk, because the headbutt was chaos. The walk was final. The headbutt was something the world spent a decade trying to explain, trying to psychoanalyze, trying to forgive or condemn. The walk was something else entirely. The walk was closure being denied in real time, on the biggest stage the sport has ever built, in front of the biggest audience it has ever pulled. And the man at the center of it didn't get to choose how he was remembered. Think about that for a second. He didn't get to choose. That's the horror of it, and it's the thing that makes this specific goodbye different from every other one on this list. Every legend we're going to talk about got to walk off on their own terms in some way. A last home game, a lap of honor, a microphone in the middle of the pitch. Something, anything. Zidane got the tunnel. Zidane got the pedestal he couldn't look at. Zidane got the referee Horacio Elizondo pulling out a red card in the 110th minute of extra time and pointing him toward the dressing room while the whole stadium tried to figure out what had just happened. Now, here's where we have to be honest with you. Zidane himself has said multiple times in multiple interviews across almost 20 years that he does not regret what he did to Materazzi. He has said that he would rather have died than apologize on the pitch that night. He has said that the words used against him crossed a line he was not willing to let stand. And FIFA later disciplined Materazzi as well for what was said. So this is not us telling you that Zidane was the villain of his own last night. He wasn't. The story is more complicated than that. It always was. But complicated doesn't undo the walk. Complicated doesn't put the trophy in his hands. Complicated doesn't give the 8-year-old in Marseille who fell asleep in front of the television that night the ending they were waiting for. And for the fans who had watched him since Cannes, since Bordeaux, since Juventus, since Real Madrid, since the '98 final in Paris, where he headed in 2 goals against Brazil and put a nation on his back, this was not the goodbye they were promised. This was a goodbye that was taken. And that's the reason we start here. Because if you want to understand every other moment on this list, you have to understand this one first. You have to understand that football doesn't owe anyone a clean ending. Not the greatest player of a generation. Not the boy from La Castellane. Not you. Not anybody. The game gives you what it gives you, and sometimes what it gives you is a walk past a trophy you can't look at, in a stadium full of people who don't know yet that they just saw the last of you. That was July 9th, 2006. And every goodbye we're going to talk about after this, in a strange way, is a reaction to that night. A correction. A rewriting. An attempt by the sport to give its heroes something Zidane never got. Some of them got it. Some of them didn't. Let's talk about the one who came the closest. Now hold that image of Zidane in your head for a second. The tunnel. The trophy. The head down. Because we're going to jump forward 6 years, and we're going to walk into a football stadium that was designed in a very literal and deliberate way to do the opposite. Turin, Juventus Stadium, May 13th, 2012. Alessandro Del Piero is 37 years old. He has spent 19 consecutive seasons at Juventus. 19. That is not a career. That is a marriage. And on this specific afternoon, in front of a home crowd that has already spent all week knowing this was coming, he is about to play his final game in a Juventus shirt. Now, here's the context that matters. Del Piero is not walking away in disgrace. He is not walking away in scandal. He is walking away as the captain of a club that has just won the Serie A title for the first time since coming back from the second division. He has just outlasted the darkest chapter in Juventus history. He was the man who refused to leave when the club was demoted after Calciopoli in 2006. He was the man who wore the black and white in Serie B when everyone else was jumping ship. And now, 6 years later, he is walking off a pitch as the last surviving symbol of the version of Juventus that used to exist before the trophy count reset. The opponent that afternoon is Atlanta. The result almost does not matter. Juventus win. Del Piero scores. And then, in a moment that the entire coaching staff has planned in advance, the referee blows the whistle, and the sport gives one of its favorite sons the exact thing it refused to give Zidane. They give him the pitch. They keep the cameras on. They cut the crowd noise. They hand him a microphone. And Del Piero, standing at the center circle of a stadium that his own goals had helped pay to build, thanks the fans. Thanks his teammates. Thanks his family. Doesn't cry, actually not at first. He is dignified. He is calm. He knows what this is. He has waited for this. He has earned this. And when he finally does start a break, near the end, the whole stadium breaks with him. Gianluigi Buffon, standing near the goal, cannot hold it in. Buffon, World Cup winner from 2006, the man who lifted the trophy in Berlin next to the pedestal that Zidane could not look at, has tears running down his face on national television because his captain is being taken out of the picture in front of him. That is the correction. That is what a proper goodbye looks like in this sport when the sport actually wants to give it. It is planned. It is public. It is loud. It gives the player the microphone. It gives the fans the moment. It gives everyone in the stadium the chance to say a word that Zidane never got to say. Goodbye. And here's the small print nobody mentions when they talk about this day. Del Piero did not actually retire that afternoon. He went to Sydney FC in Australia. He played 2 more years in a league nobody in Europe was tracking, in a country where nobody knew who he was because he wanted a few more matches in his legs before he stopped forever. Which means technically, this was not the last time you would ever see Alessandro Del Piero play football. But was the last time you would ever see Alessandro Del Piero play football. Because after May 13, 2012, the version of Del Piero you had grown up watching, the number 10, the Juventus captain, the boy from Conegliano with the left foot from another planet, was gone. What played in Australia was a great player enjoying his pension. What played in Turin that Sunday afternoon was the last of a species. And that is the trap of these moments. You do not always realize it in the stadium. You do not always realize it when it happens. Sometimes the goodbye is loud and planned, and you have a week to prepare for it, and you still don't fully understand what you're watching until years later, when you go back and look at the tape, and you see the exact minute the number 10 walked off the pitch, waved at the north stand, and the sport quietly closed a book that had been open since 1993. If you're getting anything out of this so far, do us a small favor. Hit the like button. Bookmark this one to come back to. It genuinely helps this channel show up in front of other fans who lived through these exact moments and never got to talk about them properly. We are just getting started. There's another goodbye we need to talk about. And this one, unlike Del Piero's, was played out in a completely different city, in a completely different country, inside the exact same stadium that Zidane could not look at 9 years earlier. 9 years. That is how long it took the sport to give one of its greats the ending it owed Zidane. Camp Nou. May 23, 2015. Xavi Hernandez is 35 years old. He has spent 17 seasons in the Barcelona first team. He has won everything a footballer can win at club level. 8 La Liga titles, 4 Champions Leagues, 2 trebles, 3 Ballon d'Or podiums standing next to Messi. And on this specific afternoon, in a 2-2 draw against Deportivo La Coruña that means almost nothing to the league table, he is playing his final home game as a Barcelona player. You would think watching that afternoon that this is the goodbye. The one you remember. The tears at the Camp Nou. The teammates lifting him. The speeches. The scarf. And it is beautiful. It is exactly the kind of moment that the sport designs for its favorite sons. But it is not actually the moment. Because Xavi has one more game. One more competitive game. And that game is going to be played in Berlin. Berlin. Champions League Final. June 6, 2015. Olympia Stadium. 9 years minus 1 month after Zinedine Zidane walked past a trophy on a pedestal inside that same stadium and did not look at it, Xavi Hernandez comes off the bench late in the second half of a match that Barcelona are winning against Juventus. Ivan Rakitic has already scored. Luis Suarez has already scored. Neymar is about to score. And when the final whistle blows, Xavi Hernandez, the last starting midfielder from a Guardiola era still in the building, walks up the steps of the Olympia Stadium, past every place Zidane had walked, and he does not have to look away from the trophy. He picks it up. Take a second with that. That is not an accident of scheduling. That is the sport correcting itself. That is the same stadium, almost the same time of year, and a completely inverted ending. The Frenchman had to walk past a trophy he could not touch. The Catalan lifted a trophy in the same building on his last night. The stone floor was the same. The lights were the same. The result was opposite. And here is where you have to sit with the honesty of it. Xavi did not actually retire that night either. He went to Al Sadd in Qatar. He played there for 4 more years. He won titles there. He coached there. He came back to coach Barcelona later and left again in circumstances that are their own separate video. Which means technically, this was also not the last time you would ever see Xavi Hernandez play football. But it was the last time you would ever see him play football that mattered. The Barcelona midfield triangle that had defined a decade of the sport, the passing patterns that had rewired what club football was even allowed to look like, the little man in the middle who never seemed to run, and yet was always somehow in the right square meter of grass. That version of Xavi was gone the second the final whistle blew in Berlin. What played in Qatar was a great player collecting a paycheck he had absolutely earned. What played in that Champions League final was the last operating instance of a footballing brain that the sport is not going to see again for a long time. Maybe not in any of our lifetimes. And here's the loop we're going to keep coming back to. Not every legend gets Berlin. Not every legend gets the microphone at the Camp Nou. Not every legend gets to script their own exit with a treble winner on the last match day of their competitive career. Zidane didn't. Del Piero got half of it. Xavi got the whole thing. The next name on this list got a version of it too. But his was quieter. His was in a country most people had stopped watching him in. And his ending, when it finally came, did not happen inside a Champions League final. It happened inside a Major League Soccer playoff game that most European fans did not even know was on television. Let's talk about the Maestro. Andrea Pirlo, 38 years old, was substituted late in a Major League Soccer playoff match in front of a crowd that mostly was not paying attention to what it was witnessing. That was it. That was the last competitive match Andrea Pirlo ever played as a professional footballer. November of 2017. 2 years into a New York City FC contract that most of Europe had already stopped tracking. A playoff series against Columbus Crew that NYCFC lost on aggregate. A substitution. A handshake. A walk toward a dugout that would not need him again. And that was the end of the career of the man widely considered the greatest deep-lying playmaker of the 21st century. Nobody in that stadium fully knew what they had just watched. There was no microphone at the center circle. There was no scarf. There was no trophy on the plinth. There was a substitution card, a manager patting him on the back, and a final scoreline that ended a career which had produced 2 Champions League medals, a World Cup, 6 Italian championships, and something even harder to count, which was a way of thinking about the midfield that half the young players in the sport are still trying to copy. Let that sit for a second. The man who had orchestrated Italy's Euro 2012 run with passes that looked like they were being delivered by a chess computer. The man who chipped Joe Hart at the European Championship with a penalty so casual it felt like an insult. The man who won Serie A titles with Milan, then went to Juventus at 32 and won 4 more in a row while everyone said he was finished. The man who, at every single one of those clubs, was the one you could not build the team without. That man ended his career in a Major League Soccer playoff on a chilly night in North America with almost none of the fans who had grown up watching him even aware the game was on. And here is the thing that hurts about it. He knew. That was the choice. Pirlo did not go to New York expecting anything else. He had already left Juventus in 2015 on his terms after a Champions League final loss to Barcelona in Berlin. Yes, the same Berlin. The same final where Xavi lifted the trophy. Pirlo was on the losing side of that match. That was his last competitive appearance in a European jersey. From there, he went to New York and then to a substitution card because that was the ending he wanted. Quiet, small, away from the machine. There was a testimonial match a few months later. San Siro, May of 2018. Old teammates in one shirt, old opponents in another, the crowd standing for 90 full minutes. It was called Notte del Maestro, the night of the Maestro, and it was beautiful, but it was not competitive. That match did not count. The match that counted, the match where football actually said goodbye to Andrea Pirlo without fully realizing it was saying goodbye, was in the middle of an MLS playoff series most of the world was not tuned in for. And this is the second version of the goodbye we have to accept exists. Is not tragic like Zidane. Is not perfect like Del Piero at the Juventus Stadium. Is not scripted like Xavi in Berlin. Is what happens when a legend simply gets tired of the stage and walks off it before the sport is ready to say the words. Pirlo did not need the microphone. He did not need the standing ovation. He just needed the season to end. And when it did, in a country that was still learning how to spell his name, football lost one of its great intelligences and did not even fully understand what was losing. This is the reason we build this list the way we do. Because the goodbye is not always the loud one. Sometimes the goodbye is a substitution in a stadium most people watching this video will never set foot in, and the moment you realize you'll never see them play again does not arrive that night. It arrives 3 years later when you're scrolling on your phone and you land on a clip of Pirlo threading a pass through 4 Germans at Euro 2012, and it hits you sideways because you didn't know you were watching the end when you were watching the end. The next name on this list, though. The next one, the sport knew. The sport had a full week to prepare, and it still could not hold itself together. Rome, May 28, 2017. Francesco Totti, 40 years old, is playing his final match for the only club he has ever played for. 25 straight seasons. Roma from beginning to end. No loans. No transfers. No mercenary chapter in the middle. The last one-club man of a serious size in the top 5 European leagues, and he is walking out for one final 90 minutes against Genoa in front of a Stadio Olimpico that has been crying for a week already. The match itself does not matter. It really doesn't. Roma win 3-2. The scoreline evaporates from memory the second the final whistle blows. What Rome came for that afternoon was not the football. Rome came for the goodbye. And here is the small pain inside this specific one that the highlight reels always leave out. Totti did not want to leave. This was not his call. He had been benched most of the season. His minutes had been cut down to almost nothing. He had spent the year sitting next to the coach, Luciano Spalletti, in a public standoff that Roman newspapers had turned into a soap opera. There is a version of history where Francesco Totti keeps playing another year, another 2 years, because he still wants to. The version we got is the version where the club decides for him. That is the honest context you need to understand what happens in the 90 minutes we are about to describe. He comes off the bench, late in the match. The crowd stands, and does not sit down again. He barely touches the ball in a way that anyone will remember. There is no dramatic assist. There is no dramatic goal. The dramatic thing is that Francesco Totti is on a football pitch inside the Stadio Olimpico wearing the number 10 of Roma for the last time, and every single one of the 60-something thousand people watching knows it. That is the whole event. That is the whole cinematic weight of the afternoon. Just the shirt. Just the number. Just the man. The final whistle blows. Roma have won. And then the sport gives Totti what it gave Del Piero, what it gave Xavi, what it refused to give Zidane. It gives him the pitch. It clears the players. It clears the technical staff. It hands him a microphone. He walks a full lap of the field, alone, waving at each end of the stadium, and the 60,000 voices in the stands do not stop for a second. His teammates are lined up along the touchline, most of them crying. Daniele De Rossi, standing there with the captain's armband about to be his, is destroyed. Whole sections of the away end are on their feet. It is Roman theater in its purest and least ironic form. Then Totti walks to the center circle. He unfolds a piece of paper, and he reads a letter to the city. The letter is not a letter he wrote to Roma the club. The letter is a letter he wrote to Roma the city. To the people, to the kids, to the taxi drivers who drove him to training, to the barman who served him espressos, to the grandfathers who took him to his first Roma match when he was 8 years old. And he reads it out loud, slowly, in a voice that cracks and holds and cracks again, and the man who spent 25 years pretending to be nothing more than a footballer stands at the middle of a football pitch and admits, in front of the world, that he is scared. Scared of what tomorrow looks like. Scared of who he is when the shirt comes off. Scared of the ordinary morning that comes when the last training session is already behind you. That is the moment. That is the exact moment the entire stadium collectively understands that they are never going to see Francesco Totti in a Roma shirt again. Not that they suspected it. Not that they had a hunch. They understand it the way you understand a door closing. Cleanly. Finally. With no version of tomorrow where it opens back up. There is one more line in that letter that has stayed with everyone who was there. He says near the end that he was hoping he could just show up the next Sunday like normal. Put the boots on. Get on the pitch. And no one would ask him any questions. That was his fantasy. That was the ending he wanted. Not this ceremony. Not this microphone. Not this letter. He just wanted one more Sunday, and then another Sunday, and then another, until his legs finally told him to stop. The sport did not give him that. The club did not give him that. And so, in front of a full house at the Olimpico, he stood at the center circle and did the version of the goodbye that they had scripted for him instead. He walks off the pitch. He disappears into the tunnel. And Francesco Totti's 25-year Roma career is over. We're going to keep this list moving because we've got a lot more ground to cover, but if this is landing for you the way we think it might be, drop a comment below with the moment you realized about your one. Doesn't have to be one of the names on this list. Could be your local hero. Could be somebody the world never talked about. We read them. We're going to talk about a bunch of them at the end. Tell us who you couldn't stop thinking about while you were watching this. Barcelona. Camp Nou. May 20th, 2018. Andres Iniesta is 34 years old. He has spent his entire adult life inside one football club. He has won everything the sport allows a player to win. He has scored the goal that won a World Cup. He has scored the goal that won a Champions League semifinal at Stamford Bridge in a manner so specific and so cold that the entire English football media had to invent new adjectives for it. And on this specific Sunday afternoon, in the final match day of La Liga against Real Sociedad, he is playing his last ever game in a Barcelona shirt. The stadium has been in tears for a week. There is not a single fan inside that ground who does not know what today is. The banners are already made. The children on the pitch before the match are already crying in the tunnel photos. When Iniesta walks out for the last time, he does not smile. He does not wave. He does the smallest possible nod because he does not trust himself to do anything larger. The match is played almost as a formality. Barcelona win. The scoreline is not really the point. Iniesta plays close to the full 90, controls what he needs to control, and then, late in the game, the manager Ernesto Valverde signals for the substitution. The stadium rises before the fourth official even holds the board up. Iniesta walks off the pitch. He hugs every teammate. He hugs every opponent within arm's reach. He walks to the touchline. And every camera in the world of football is already crying with him. But that is not the moment. The moment is what happens after the final whistle. Because after the referee has blown and the players have shaken hands and the stadium is expecting the standard end-of-season lap, Iniesta walks back onto the pitch and he brings his children with him. Small, wearing miniature Barcelona kits, holding their father's hands. And together they walk a slow, quiet, unhurried lap of the Camp Nou while 90-something thousand people stand in almost complete silence and just watch. No chants, no songs, just a father and his children on a football pitch, walking. That is when the stadium understands. That is the moment. Is not the substitution. Is not the sideline embrace. Is not the tears on the bench. It is the second his son grips his hand a little tighter and looks up at him with a look that 100 million people can read from their couches, which is the look of a small child understanding for the first time that the biggest place in his father's life is about to close forever. And here is the part of the story where we have to be honest with you, because we corrected ourselves earlier and we're going to correct ourselves again. Iniesta did not stop playing that night. He went to Vissel Kobe in Japan. He played there for years. He played briefly in the Emirates after that. He did not officially retire until much later. Which means, technically, this was not the last time you would ever see Andres Iniesta play football. But it was the last time you would ever see Andres Iniesta play the version of football he had built. The Barcelona midfield triangle that had run the sport for the better part of a decade. The one-touch, no-look, half-second ahead of you kind of football that could not exist without him standing in the middle of it. That kind of football does not travel to Japan. That kind of football does not travel to the Emirates. That kind of football requires a Camp Nou pitch, a Messi to your left, and a Busquets behind you. And when you walk off with your kids under the floodlights, the specific piece of the sport that lived inside you goes with you. That is what the 90,000 people understood while they stood in silence. That is what they were saying goodbye to. Not the player. The version of the sport that only existed while he was standing inside it. And that is the third kind of goodbye on this list. Not the taken one like Zidane. Not the scripted one like Del Piero or Xavi or Totti. Not the geographically far one like Pirlo. But the transparent one. The one where the stadium and the player both fully understand what they are watching in the same moment, at the same time, with no illusion between them. Everyone in the Camp Nou that Sunday knew exactly what they were losing. Iniesta knew exactly what he was giving up. And for one long, silent lap of the pitch, with his children next to him, the entire building agreed to hold the moment together until it was done. The next goodbye on this list, though, is different. The next one nobody planned. The next one nobody saw coming. The next one starts with a football match in a country most of the world was not watching, and it ends with the greatest goalkeeper of a generation crying in a hallway, on camera, in front of a microphone, telling the world that the only thing he had ever wanted had just been taken from him. Let's talk about that night. Milan, San Siro, November 13th, 2017. Italy versus Sweden. Second leg. Playoff for the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Italy have lost the first leg 1-0 in Stockholm 3 days earlier. All they have to do at home is win. All they have to do at San Siro, the temple of Italian football, in front of an 80,000-strong tricolor crowd, is score 2 goals against Sweden. That is the whole ask. 2 goals. 90 minutes. Home advantage. The greatest goalkeeper in the country's history standing behind them wearing the armband. They score 0. The match ends 0-0. Italy are eliminated. And for the first time since 1958, the country that has won 4 World Cups and given the sport half of its tactical vocabulary is not going to World Cup. Not going. At all. Not even the first round. A generation of Italian kids is about to grow up watching the summer of 18 without a shirt of their own to wear. The whistle blows. And the moment the crowd realizes what has just happened, San Siro goes silent in a way you almost never hear a football stadium go silent. There is no booing. There is no rage. There is a low, held morning sore quiet. 80,000 people processing simultaneously that something has ended that they did not think could end. Gianluigi Buffon walks to the sideline. He is 39 years old. He has played in 5 World Cup squads. He has won 1. He has kept goal for the Italian national team for 20 years. He has captained more Italy games than any goalkeeper in the country's history. And in the middle of a pitch he cannot bring himself to look at, in a stadium that is standing but not making any noise, he starts to cry, on camera, in front of every television in Italy. Now this is where the moment we are here for actually happens. It is not on the pitch. It is a few minutes later. In the tunnel. Rai Television has him for a live interview. He is still wearing the shirt. He is still soaked in sweat. His face is red. His voice is completely gone. And through the tears on live television, in a hallway underneath the stadium where his career had been decorated for 2 decades, he apologizes. He apologizes to the country. He apologizes to fans. He apologizes to the boys who came up under him and were not going to get their chance now. He says that the one thing he genuinely regrets in his career is that he was not able to give them one more summer. That he had failed at something that meant more to him than everything he had already won. That he was sorry, and that he did not know what else to say. And then, right there on the live interview, he tells the country that this is the end of his Italy career. That he will not play for the Azzurri again. 20 years. A World Cup medal. A Euros runner-up medal. 2 decades as the face of the national team. And it ends in a tunnel, on live television, in tears because a Sweden side he cannot save the goal against had just knocked his country out of a tournament he thought he was walking into. That is the 4th kind of goodbye on this list. The one that arrives without any warning. There was no ceremony designed for that night. There was no letter written in advance. There was no scarf. There was no lap of honor. There was a 0-0 scoreline, a stunned crowd, and a live camera catching a great man in the exact minute the door closed behind him. And this is what makes it hurt in a way that the planned ones do not. Because everyone watching, at home on their couches, holding a beer they had opened for a completely different kind of night, understood at the same time that they had just watched the last of him, and had not prepared for it emotionally at all. Now, we have to be fair to the historical record here, because we always do that on this channel. Buffon did come back later. He was recalled by Roberto Mancini for a handful of friendlies. He officially played his last Italy match some months after Sweden. So it was not literally the end. But the version of Buffon that was Italy's Buffon, the one you had grown up watching, the goalkeeper who had defined the position for the Azzurri for a full generation, that Buffon ended in the San Siro tunnel on November 13th. Everything after that was a courtesy match. Everything after that was a farewell tour. The actual ending, the one that mattered, the one that made you feel it in your chest whether you were Italian or not, was that live interview under the stadium. And here is the second CTA break we're going to take because this next section is heavy and we want to give you a moment. If this list is doing something to you, if you are watching this and one of these names has already made you pause, hit the subscribe button. This channel is building an entire archive of these moments, one legend at a time, and we don't want you to miss the next one. Ring the bell too. YouTube does not tell you the next video is up unless you tell it to. We're heading into the darkest chapter of this list now. The one that isn't about a goodbye at all. The one that's about a training session on an ordinary May morning in Portugal, and a phone call to a hospital, and a career that stopped in the middle of a sentence. Let's talk about Iker. May 1st, 2019. A Wednesday morning. Iker Casillas is 37 years old. He is at the Porto training ground in northern Portugal. He is doing a normal midweek session. He has been at Porto for 4 years now, ever since leaving Real Madrid in the summer of 2015 in a press conference so painful that many Real Madrid fans have never emotionally recovered from watching it. He is in the final weeks of another Portuguese league campaign. He is the starting goalkeeper of one of the biggest clubs in the country. Everything on the surface is normal. And then, in the middle of a session, in the middle of a piece of training that thousands of players do every single day of their careers, Iker Casillas has a heart attack. Right there, on the pitch. In front of his teammates, in front of the coaching staff. The medical team is on him within seconds. An ambulance is on the pitch within minutes. He is rushed to a hospital in Porto. And the entire football world, in the space of maybe 40 minutes, goes from not thinking about Iker Casillas at all to holding its breath and refreshing news pages waiting to see if he is alive. He survives. And this is the thing that gets lost, so we're going to say it clearly. He survives. Iker Casillas walks out of that hospital. He is fine, in the sense that he's alive and able to lead a full life. This is not a tragedy in the way that some football stories are. He gets to go home. He gets to see his children grow up. This is not the story of a life ending. Nobody is telling you that. But it is the story of a career ending, in the middle of a sentence, with absolutely no warning. Iker Casillas, who had won 5 La Liga titles, 3 Champions Leagues, a European Championship in 2008, a World Cup in 2010 in South Africa, another European Championship in 2012, and had spent an entire decade being the face of the greatest generation of Spanish football that has ever existed, was one Wednesday morning training session away from never playing professional football again. And he did not know it when he woke up that morning. The physio did not know it. His teammates did not know it. The coach did not know it. It just happened. He officially retired the following August, in 2020. It took him more than a year to say the words publicly because there was no version of him walking out of that hospital that wanted to say those words. But he did not play a competitive match again after May 1st. That was it. The last competitive appearance of the man who lifted the World Cup in Johannesburg in 2010, in the yellow shirt with the number 1 on his back, was some ordinary league fixture in Portugal that nobody was mentally cataloging as the last of anything. Now this is where this goodbye becomes the darkest one on the list. Because Casillas already had a bad goodbye once. He had one at Real Madrid, in that press conference in 2015, when he cried alone at a table because Florentino Perez, the president of the club he had joined at 9 years old, did not show up to send him off. That was bad enough. That was one of the worst institutional goodbyes in the modern history of the sport, and every Real Madrid fan you know, who is over the age of 30, will still bring it up if you ask them. Casillas had already been through the sport failing to give him the exit he had earned. And then, for years later, the sport did it to him again, worse this time, in a training session in Portugal on a Wednesday morning. Here is what this one teaches us that the others cannot. Zidane got a walk past a trophy. Del Piero got a microphone. Xavi got Berlin. Totti got a letter. Iniesta got a lap with his kids. Pirlo got a substitution in an MLS playoff and a quiet trip home. Buffon got a tunnel interview on live Italian television. Every one of those goodbyes, planned or unplanned, at least had the mercy of being a goodbye. There was a moment. There was a match. There was a shirt taken off in the tunnel afterwards. There was a version of the player, in his own head, and in the sport's head, that understood what had just happened. Casillas did not get any of that. Casillas got a chest pain on a training pitch. Casillas got a phone call to his family. Casillas got a hospital corridor, and a doctor telling him his career was over in the same sentence he was being told his life was not. There was no last match. There was no last save. There was no last exit from Stadium Tunnel. The moment you realized you would never see Iker Casillas play again arrived after the fact on a Wednesday afternoon, when the news alerts started pinging on your phone and told you what had happened 400 kilometers away in a training complex you had never heard of. And that is the shape of it. The one goodbye on this list where the moment you realized you would never see him play again did not happen inside a stadium at all. It happened at your desk, on your phone, in the middle of your regular Wednesday. And the sport did not get to correct itself this time. There was no Berlin to fix it later. There was no testimonial the following spring. The end had already happened, in a place none of us were looking, on a day nobody had circled. That is the danger of this list. That is why we are talking about it. Because the goodbye you are prepared for is not the one that hurts. The goodbye that hurts is the one you did not know was a goodbye at the time. Take a step back with us for a second. We have just walked through 7 completely different goodbyes. In 7 different countries. In 7 different competitions, over the course of more than a decade of professional football. A Frenchman in Berlin, an Italian in Turin, a Spaniard in Barcelona, an Italian somewhere in America, a Roman in Rome, a Spaniard again in Barcelona, an Italian in Milan, a Spaniard in Portugal. And here is the thing that should have been obvious from the beginning, but only becomes clear after you line them up next to each other. They are all the same event, not the same emotionally, not the same in tone, not the same in setting. Every one of them is different in the details, but they are the same underlying event, and the event is this. A player who felt like part of the permanent structure of your emotional life, A player you had watched for so long that you had stopped counting the years, stops being a player, and there's exactly 1 second where the world, watching, understands that. And that 1 second is not the second you expect. That is the pattern. That is the piece of the puzzle. Is not the ceremony. Is not the match. Is not the trophy, or the substitution, or the letter. Is the moment your brain, sitting on a couch, holding a beer, arguing about something completely irrelevant, quietly registers a sentence you did not know you were writing. That was the last of him. I am not going to see him again. And here is the strange thing about that moment. It is almost never the loudest part of the goodbye. Zidane's headbutt was louder than the walk past the trophy. The Del Piero speech at the center circle was louder than the moment Buffon started to cry near the goal. The Totti letter was louder than the specific line about wanting a normal Sunday. The Iniesta substitution was louder than the second where his son gripped his hand tighter than usual. The Casillas farewell press conference at Real Madrid in 2015 was louder than the news alert on a Wednesday afternoon in 2019. In every single one of these stories, the actual moment where the goodbye lands in the body of the person watching is a quieter, smaller, more accidental piece of day than the ceremony designed around it. Why does that keep happening? The answer, and we're going to say this as carefully as we can, is that the ceremonies are built for the player. The moments are built for you. The stadium designs the goodbye it thinks it owes to the man on the pitch. The tunnel steps that Zidane walked past. The microphone at the Juventus Stadium. The scarf at Camp Nou. The letter at the Olimpico. Those are gifts from the sport to the man. But the moment you actually feel it, the moment your brain registers loss, is a completely different frequency of event. It happens in the 90 seconds before the ceremony, or the 20 minutes after it, or a full 4 years later when you're scrolling on your phone. It happens on your time, not the stadium's time. And that is why it hurts. Because the ceremony is designed to help you process, and you never actually process on schedule. This is why the goodbyes you did not see coming, like Casillas on that training pitch, or Buffon in that tunnel, feel almost worse than the planned ones. Because they collapse the two events. They collapse the ceremony and the moment into the same second. There is no time to build a defense. There is no scheduled place to put the emotion. It just arrives. And this is also why the planned ones, the Totti ones, the Del Piero ones, still sneak past you. Because you thought you were ready. You had a week of build-up. You had headlines. You had highlight reels. You knew it was coming. And then a small thing happened. A specific line in the letter. A specific hug on the sideline. A specific way the crowd went quiet at a specific second. And it landed anyway. Because the moment does not care about your preparation. The moment lives in a different second than the ceremony does. So here is the sentence we want you to carry with you when we get into the last part of this list. Every one of these players ended. Every one of these careers is over. And every fan who cared about them lived through the exact experience we have just described in some version of it at some point in the last 20 years, whether they realized it at the time or not. The reason we're making this video is not to make you feel bad. The reason we're making this video is to give a name to something you already know. There is a moment in the life of a fan where a player stops being a player, and it is a real event, and it deserves to be talked about like a real event, not like a sports headline. Which brings us to the darker part of the conversation. Because there are two names we have deliberately not talked about yet, and there is one name that we buried inside the video, and it is time to bring them all back up. Let's talk about the ones we did not say goodbye to properly. There is a name on this list that we owe you. It is a name we have not said yet, and it is a name that a lot of you have already been thinking about while watching this video, because for a certain generation of football fan, he is the one who represents this idea more purely than any other player of the modern era. His name is Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho does not have a moment. That is the whole point of putting him here. Ronaldinho, arguably the most joyful footballer any of us ever watched, the man who redefined what it looked like to enjoy playing for a living, the number 10 of Barcelona, in the season where the Bernabeu stood up and clapped him in the middle of a Real Madrid home defeat, the man on the covers of the magazines that shaped how we thought about football for the entire mid-2000s, does not have a scene we can point to and say, that is where the world realized we would never see him play. Again, he does not have a Berlin. He does not have a letter at the Olimpico. He does not have a lap of honor with his kids. He has a fade. That is all he has. A slow, undignified, geographically scattered fade from Milan to Flamengo, to Atletico Mineiro, to Querétaro in Mexico, to Fluminense, and then to nothing, without a ceremony, without an announcement, without a single afternoon anywhere in the world where stadiums stood up in unison and said the word goodbye. He was announced as retired in 2018 quietly by his brother in a press statement that most of the football world did not even see on the day it was published. That is the goodbye Ronaldinho got. A press release. Not from him. From his brother. Filed to a wire service. And the man who had done the elastico on a pitch in a Champions League knockout tie and made Real Madrid fans in the Bernabeu applaud him in a Barcelona shirt disappeared from professional football with about the ceremony of an office worker retiring from a company you have never heard of. That is the worst version of this. And it is worth naming because it did not have to happen that way. Ronaldinho did not have to fade. There was time to plan a goodbye. There was time to book a match at the Camp Nou. There was time to give him a scarf at a center circle. The sport just did not do it. The club did not push for it. He did not push for it. And it slipped through the cracks in a way that a career that important should never have been allowed to slip through the cracks. So when we say the goodbye is not always the loud one, sometimes the goodbye is not there at all. Sometimes there is nothing there. Just a slow disappearance from a game you loved to see him inside. Ricardo Kaka. Same story, softer version. Kaka won a Ballon d'Or. Kaka won a Champions League. Kaka carried Milan on his back through a run that people are still watching on YouTube almost 20 years later. Kaka retired in 2017 quietly at Orlando City in Major League Soccer without a moment that the sport agreed to remember together. Same pattern, same fade, same sentence never said out loud. And this is where we have to say the two names we have been holding back the entire video. Because they are living right now through the pre-goodbye phase. And the whole point of making this video, the reason we're telling you all of this in the exact month we're telling you it, is because it is happening again. In front of us. In real time. And most of us are not paying enough attention to notice. Lionel Messi is playing at Inter Miami. Cristiano Ronaldo is playing at Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. They are both still playing. They are both still scoring. They are both still doing things on a football pitch that nobody else on the planet can do. And they are both, whether they will say it out loud or not, playing out the second-to-last chapter of the greatest careers the sport has ever produced. There is a moment coming for both of them. There is a substitution coming, or a match coming, or a press conference coming, and it will land in the exact way we have been describing this entire video, whether the sport plans it well or not, whether the ceremony is designed correctly or not, whether we are prepared for it or not. And this is the honest sentence we want to leave you with before the last block. If you have a Messi memory that has not fully landed for you yet, if you have a Cristiano memory that you keep telling yourself you'll get around to feeling later, if you have a version of these two players in your head that you have not yet said any version of goodbye to, even just internally, we are asking you to think about that right now. Because the pattern of this entire video is that the fans who did not think about it while it was happening are the ones who felt it hardest years later. And they are the ones who would give anything to go back and just watch one more match on purpose. Not distracted. Not on a phone. Not half watching while making dinner. Just watching. Just being in the room while the player is still in the room. The list of goodbyes we did not say properly is longer than the list of goodbyes we did. That is the truth of the sport. Ronaldinho. Kaka. Rivaldo. Ronaldo Nazario in a weird, staggered way. Roberto Carlos. Puyol. Vieira. Cafu. Deco. Half of the players you fell in love with when you first started paying attention to football have already ended, and most of them did it without a moment the world agreed to remember together. The ones on this list are the exception. The ones on this list got some version of the ceremony. Most players do not. Which brings us to the last thing we have to say. Sometimes it isn't the goodbye that hurts. It's the fact you didn't know it was the goodbye. That is where this video started. And now that we are here at the end of it, we want you to sit with that sentence one more time. Because everything we have talked about in the last 40+ minutes, every legend on this list, every stadium we have walked through, every letter we have quoted, every hallway we have described, is a version of that same sentence. A player you loved is gone. And there is one specific second in the memory of the fan who loved him where that fact settled in. And that second is what football at its core is actually made of. Not the trophies. Not the tables. Not the statistics. The seconds. The seconds where the sport stopped being a game for you and became a memory instead. The second Zidane walked past the trophy in Berlin. The second Del Piero unfolded a microphone at the Juventus Stadium. The second Xavi lifted a trophy in the same building Zidane had walked past. The second Pirlo raised a hand at the touchline in a country that did not fully know what it was watching. The second Totti's letter cracked at the middle line. The second Iniesta's son gripped his hand tighter than usual. The second Buffon started to cry on live television in a tunnel underneath the San Siro. The second Casillas hit the grass on a Wednesday morning in Porto. Every one of those seconds is a permanent piece of the memory of the person who was watching. And you cannot get them back. You cannot unwatch them. They stay where they were put. Forever. That is the only thing the sport actually gives you to keep. Everything else can be taken away. The clubs can rebuild. The tactics can change. The generation can turn over. The stadium can be renovated. The commentator you grew up listening to can retire. The camera angles can go 4K. The kits can add sponsors. Every surface of the sport is temporary, and every surface of the sport is going to be replaced within a decade of you noticing it exists. But the second you realized you would never see them play again is permanent. That second belongs to you. It cannot be taken back and cannot be rewritten. And the reason we are making videos like this one on this channel is because those seconds deserve a place. They deserve to be talked about like the real events they are. Not like sports headlines. Not like nostalgia porn. Not like content. Like the actual, permanent, non-negotiable pieces of the emotional lives of the millions of people who watch them happen. So we want to leave you with a few things. The first is a favor. If any of what we just said landed for you, in any way, hit the like button. It is the smallest possible thing you can do, and it is the thing that helps this channel show up in front of other fans who are carrying the same seconds you are, and who never had anywhere to put them. Hit subscribe if you have not already. Ring the bell, because YouTube will not tell you when the next one goes up unless you specifically ask it to. We are building an ongoing archive of these stories, one legend at a time, and we do not want you to miss it. The second is a conversation, and we mean this seriously. We want to hear yours. In the comments below, we want you to answer 3 questions, and please answer them one at a time so we can actually read them and reply. Which player was your moment? Not one of the names on this list. Yours. The one whose ending is a permanent second in your memory. What were you doing when you realized it? On the couch. At a bar. At the stadium itself. In a hospital waiting room. On your phone at work. Tell us the room. And the third question, the hardest one. Would you have watched that match differently if you had known it was going to be the last one? Would you have put your phone down? Would you have asked your kids to sit still? Would you have called someone into the room? Answer that one honestly. It matters more than the other two. The third is a promise. We are already working on the next chapter of this series. The next one is not about the ones who left. The next one is about the ones who stayed too long. The great players who fought the ending. Who refused to accept the second. Who kept playing anyway, past the point where the sport wanted them to stop, and gave us a completely different kind of goodbye to try and make sense of. If you want to be here for that one, you know what to do. Subscribe, and we will meet you there. Because in the end, the game moves on. New number 10s will come. New captains will be handed the armband. New goalkeepers will save new penalties in new tunnels. The clubs will keep winning things. The trophies will keep being lifted. The seasons will keep beginning again every August like nothing ever happened. But the seconds you are carrying, the ones we have just spent this entire video trying to name for you, do not go anywhere. They stay exactly where they were put. And every once in a while on a quiet afternoon, when you least expect it, you will land on a clip of one of them on your phone, and it will hit you sideways all over again. That is what it means to love the sport. That is the price of it. And that is the reason we made this video. Thank you for watching. We'll see you at the next one.